The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Valley, hooey Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking fan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood, where you're terrific if you're even good. Where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premier podcast. Damn you, Hollywood. And this review is all his fault. Robert Winfree. Yay!
No. You do
this
not.
It's all your fault.
No. Stop
yes.
that. No. You were going to do this before.
I was not. No.
Bull.
No.
This was already on the schedule.
No, Bull. It wasn't. No, it wasn't. I'll let me tell you a tale. I was not going to do this. I was going to let Alexis Hejna. Hello, Alexis Hejna.
I was going to say, isn't this the point where you two just point the blame at me and I just sit here with my arms crossed saying it's like, I always got to shoulder all the blame on this show.
Yeah, no, you're the big hostage in this situation. This was so the story goes like this. I wasn't going to do this because we were doing Big George Foreman this week, and that was the Damn You Hollywood show, and I wasn't going to do any more than that. And I wasn't going to do a triple feature because I'm social and I don't have a lot of time. So I wasn't doing this. But then the protocol son, Jason Teasley, in our group chat decided that Peter Pan was a child trafficker and a pedophile because he likes to tweak the nipples of everyone in our group chat and stir the pot.
Hang on. In fairness to Jason's point, the child trafficking thing is arguable. I'm not saying I'm convinced by it. I'm saying that's a point you might be able to argue.
Okay.
It could be worse. It could have been the plot line front that they did with Peter Pan from Once Upon a Time where he was a literal sociopath.
The less said about Once Upon a Time, the better. Listen.
Speak truth.
So Jason did this whole thing. So in all seriousness, for people trying to understand why we're here today to talk about Peter Pan and Wendy. Blah.
Remember, it's Peter Pan, but more importantly, it's Wendy.
Yes, it's Peter Pan in small letters, Wendy in big shiny letters.
Because this movie actually found a way to make one of the most iconic characters in children's literature into a side story or a side character in his own movie.
In Disney's defense, they're getting really good at that.
No, they're not.
Well, no, they do it. It's not good, but they do it. But their ability to do it is very sharp. They do it every single time without fail.
So they're consistent. That doesn't mean they're good.
Yes, fine. Anyway, to move
at this point, their brand is just emasculation and girl bosses.
Pretty much.
It's like they might as well have just called the movie Wendy Darling. And for the record, you want to make a movie about Wendy, that's perfectly fine.
Right. And no one will see it, and that's great. But then do that and stop with the bait and switch. Look, Doctor Strange, America Chavez.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I can finally finish this. I wasn't going to do this movie, but then Jason started some shit in the thing, and then Robert Winfree, being autistic, comes in the room and is like,
"I'm undiagnosed and maybe a little bit." Don't be that way.
Not even like recognizing that Jason is clearly trolling. And
I knew it.
And I'm clearly trying to not get him to troll. Like I'm at this point, I'm treating him like one of the kids that isn't mine in the house, where like I'm not paying attention to your bad behavior anymore. Like if you're gonna act out, if you're going to, the only way you can get attention is through negative behavior. I'm not going to give into that. And I'm trying to get the rest of you idiots in the group chat to also not give in to his bad behavior. And you're all playing, and then there's you, oblivious to everything. You're like my wife. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Let me tell you a tale about how Peter Pan is. I used to have this long flowing mane, and I yanked it out because of you. And I said, fine, we'll talk about this stupid movie so that you have an opportunity to do an impromptu. And this is the only reason why I'm here. An impromptu. Everyone loves a bad guy, Peter Pan, because I want to hear your cockamamie argument.
Okay, well, for the record, Mark's exaggerating. However, and my position, my position has never been that Pan is the villain. My position is that he's not the hero.
I said that. I corrected myself. I corrected myself because the last time I said
you also had internet issues right about then, so I'm making sure.
Okay. Yes. In case I froze, yes, I am. I said this yesterday when we discussed Big George Foreman. He's like, oh, he has this cockamamie argument about Peter Pan being the villain. He said, not the villain, just not the hero. I'm like, ugh. Anyway, so we are in fact talking about Peter Pan and Wendy, the latest garbage to come out of Disney Plus, a streaming service currently killing that studio. And Peter Pan and Wendy is an abomination.
Tell us how you really feel, Mark.
It's also.
Okay, do we even have to go into the plot synopsis? If you know the story of Peter Pan, you genuinely know it. Can we just go into talking about why this is a failure?
I can do this very quickly.
You can both wait for me to finish my part. Peter Pan and Wendy is a 2023 American fantasy adventure film.
Oh, you gotta read the wiki.
Using those words loosely. Directed by David Lowery. David Lowery, currently Hollywood's greatest monster.
That's an exaggeration. It's Hollywood. There's much worse monsters than him.
He was responsible for The Green Knight, which Ronnie and I reviewed in 2021. The Old Man and the Gun.
Hang on. He directed Pete's Dragon, which you and I reviewed.
Yes, we did, Ollie. A Ghost Story. Ain't Them Bodies Saints? Which feels like it's something somebody would have said in The Wire.
This is not a director made for studio projects. Let's just put it out there.
He said in an interview that he was really excited to direct this because apparently the story of Peter Pan is a very personal one to him, and this was kind of a passion project. But considering how this movie just reeks of studio notes and focus groups,
this one got away from him.
Okay, either Lowery is full of it and he's lying,
Possible.
Or this passion project of his is exactly what a studio exec wanted, and the stars just perfectly aligned for this piece of crap.
From a screenplay he wrote with Toby Halbrooks, Jim Whitaker served as producer on the Walt Disney Pictures production, which is a live-action adaptation of the Walt Disney's 1953 animated film Peter Pan. What makes the Red Man red? In turn, based on the 1904 play Peter Pan or the Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, also known as Peter and Wendy by J.M. Barrie.
Can I just say, I know you can't do that song again. That's actually a really musically, not content, musically. Yeah. That's actually a pretty good song.
Oh, it's got a great beat to it. It's let me say that's a song that we all enjoyed in the movie until we got old enough and we realized,
Speak for yourself.
Shouldn't be singing this.
Speak for yourself, you liberal panty waste. I still don't have a problem with it. I just know what world I live in.
Yeah, again, it's entirely. I don't have any problem enjoying things I used to enjoy and still acknowledging that, you couldn't do this today, and that's not always a bad thing.
I didn't say you couldn't enjoy it. I'm the girl that still watches Looney Tunes that clearly have blackface and other horrible stereotypes in it. I simply said that's a song that you can no longer sing in public.
Not without annoying somebody. So I get what you're saying.
So the film Mark, I imagine you will be humming this on your
at every possible opportunity.
There you go.
The film stars Alexander Molony in his film debut. And Ever Anderson as Ray Palpatine.
He is clearly showing it.
Yeah. It also stars Jude Law, Yara Shahidi, something unpronounceable, Joshua Pickering, Jacobi Jupe, Molly Parker, Alan Tudyk, and Jim Gaffigan. The story follows Peter Pan and Wendy, who go to the magical world of Neverland with Wendy's brothers, Peter's best friend, Tinkerbell. Along the way, Wendy, the key to everything, the most important person in this film, embarks on an adventure that will change her life and encounters Peter's arch enemy, Captain Hook. It premiered on Disney Plus, the streaming service currently killing that company, on April 28th, 2023, and generally received favorable reviews from the bought critics. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a lie.
Look, there was a period of time for about 3 hours in which the total number of critical reviews for this was barely into double digits, and it was about 60% fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Then it actually got into release, and they could no longer hold back the floodgates of people who were not shills.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like to think that the whole general favorable reviews was probably just given solely to Jude Law, and they're like, yeah, it's generally favorable. If you look at one actor,
Yeah,
probably not wrong.
All right, let's get on with this piece of shit.
All right, so the plot, it does follow loosely the general Peter Pan structure. We are introduced to the Darling family. Wendy is about to leave for boarding school rather than simply being kicked out of the nursery. She wishes never to grow up, and life is not fair, and why can't things stay the same? And Peter Pan does not overhear this. Tinkerbell overhears this. And because women support women, right, Mark? Tinkerbell shows up and gives her fairy dust, and then Peter Pan shows up and is like, yeah, I'm looking for my shadow. Because it's here somewhere, and he finds it, and Wendy sews it back onto him, so he's got it back. And Peter's like, I know you don't want to grow up. You can come with me, you can go to Neverland, and it'll all be great. And Wendy's brothers wake up and go, but take us too. And Peter goes, nobody wants you here. The script doesn't want you here.
We're only interested in the girl.
You could be completely excised from this story and nothing of value would be lost.
Michael's teddy bear has a bigger plot point than the brothers.
Michael's teddy bear has more character.
Both of those are true. But they take the brothers anyway because they do. And they fly around on a horrible screen. They fly through Big Ben, wind up in Neverland where they briefly see mermaids, and Neverland just looks a little bit like, Scotland.
I thought it looked like, okay, so apparently it was filmed in British Columbia. Okay, I thought it was New Zealand. But either way, the scene where Wendy goes, I could never imagine something like this. I remember looking going, you could never imagine what looks like the standard panning shots from the filler scenes of Lord of the Rings.
It was less vibrant than that. That's why Canada tracks more. It's a lot grayer than New Zealand. So they arrive in this gray wash sepia tone island. And as they arrive, they are spotted by Captain Hook and Jude Law, and the only redeemable part about this entire movie. And Captain Hook starts firing the cannons at the children. Because this is your tragic redeemed hero at the end, by the way, just unloading cannon fire at children. Eventually, they are nearly hit. They are separated. Michael and John get picked up by the pirates. Wendy is found by fellow girl boss Tiger Lily, who alternates between speaking her native language and speaking English.
Honestly, you could have convinced me that character was just having a stroke and speaking gibberish, and it would have had zero effect on that character in the plot.
It kills me because, okay, as we previously said, you couldn't do Peter Pan with the Indians as they were originally written or the 1950s classic. We get that. So it's so clear that the producers, directors, I don't care who said, okay, we're going to make them accurate. And she is speaking a proper Native American language. She's speaking Cree. But it's abundantly clear that they said, see, we got it right. We got it right. And everyone else said, yeah. And what's the point?
Right.
What do they do?
Right. When they do it in Prey, it makes sense. You have people talking to each other. You're trying to be drawn into this alien world of these native people. When she's doing it, so I saw Guardians of the Galaxy last night, and without giving too much away, there's a scene where they're talking to an alien race, and the alien race is speaking in their native language, and nobody can, and they're just speaking like English, and nobody can understand each other, and they're trying to awkwardly move through this scene. But like having like pantomime things. They didn't even do that here. She just like the movie is happening, and then Tiger Lily just walks into frame, speaks Cree, and then walks out of frame as if nobody noticed her. It's the weirdest thing.
She does not walk, Mark. She must ride the majestic white horse.
Yeah, sure.
While her underlings.
Yeah, she got what can we say? She got discount Artex.
They pulled him out of the mud.
Should have had the same fate.
Anyway, moving on.
And the Lost Boys, who are now the Lost Collection of androgynous people.
Yes,
the Lost
Inclusive Children.
The Lost Rainbow Coalition shows up.
Yes.
You guys do know why in the books it was the Lost Boys and why Peter said there were no lost girls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was the line? Girls are the Lost Boys are children who fell out of their prams when they were babies, and then Peter and Tinkerbell rescued them. And Wendy says, well, what about girls? And Peter says, girls are too smart to fall out of their prams.
Yeah. Like, the actual line is, girls aren't, something to the effect of, girls aren't stupid enough to wind up here.
Terrific.
But, we can't have women be different than men. The only way to make women better is to make them better at what men do, rather than celebrating our differences.
Look, I'm all for the human race going 100% hermaphroditic.
That tracks way too much and tells me way too much about you.
And it's worth pointing out, Wendy goes, but you're not all boys. And the twins go, so what? And Wendy goes, okay, I guess there's no point in arguing or discussing why you're all called the Lost Boys when you're girls. We're just going to shrug our shoulders and move on to the next stupid plot point.
Because nothing placates your stupid writing like Ray Palpatine going, somehow my grandfather returned. So they all show up. They go to rescue Michael and John, who are taken to Skull Rock and about to be sacrificed. And Peter shows up and we get a crappy sword fight. And the brothers are rescued. And then the crocodile shows up. And we will never speak of the crocodile again.
Yes, in all of his pixelated glory.
And much like the shortcut, we shall never speak of the crocodile again. And Peter then Wendy bitch slaps Peter after they rescue everyone. Because he's happy. He had a great adventure. And she's like, but we almost died. And he's like, well, you suck. You're not a kid. This is adventure. This is what it looks like. And she just kind of bemoans, but this isn't what I thought it would be. I got everything I wanted, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And he goes, wow, you grew up. Get out. But instead of actually ending the movie there, they all go back home where Wendy sings everyone a lullaby after Peter reveals that he's actually just a whiny emo in this movie. And Captain Hook hears them singing, so he shows up as we get the big reveal that in this iteration of Peter Pan, James Hook used to be one of the Lost Boys. He was Peter's best friend, but he missed his mom. And Peter said, there will be no women here. We are the He-Man Woman Haters Club. And he booted him out of Neverland. And James wound up lost at sea and found by pirates and raised by pirates. And this is why he's terrible. And he came back because he never made it back home. Don't you understand? And Peter cut off his hand and fed it to the crocodile because Peter is Peter. And now that we're all here, rather than a bomb, because the budget did not allow for an explosion, the pirates all kidnap the Lost Boys. And Hook goes up to confront Pan one more time, and he gives him a little scratch. And Peter then falls. And Tinkerbell's captured.
I never understood how that brief scratch apparently nearly kills Peter. I did not, and I'll admit I probably wasn't, paying 100% attention because this movie is boring as hell. But I'm just like, I'm sorry. Did I miss something? Did we do the poison scene from the classic play or something? What the hell?
And Peter then falls, and Tinkerbell's captured, and the dam breaks, and everyone's taken to the pirate ship. And Peter falls somewhere into the bowels of the earth. No one knows exactly where, but far off in the distance, Mark, the medicine woman of the tribe of Tiger Lily receives a spirit vision, and Tiger Lily comes to the rescue.
Of course she does.
And she finds Peter and she rubs dirt on it and tells him to walk it off.
Oh wait, no, his shadow alert. Okay, I'll actually admit I kind of like the idea that his shadow is the one who alerts Tiger Lily. Little callback to the shadow separating in the first part of the story. Not the worst thing that they added to this movie. It's not stellar, but it's not the worst.
So Tiger Lily shows up and again gives Peter a salt pellet and tells him to walk it off. And meanwhile on the ship we get a heart-to-heart between Hook and Wendy, where once again Jude Law proves he is better than this entire stupid movie. But ultimately they decide, we will raise the Lost Boys as pirates because more pirates. And Wendy will walk the plank. So Wendy starts walking the plank, but she is saved, Mark. She is saved as she steps off the plank by the only thing that ever saves women anymore, realizing her own potential.
And then you can hear the studio notes as Jude Law says, "You have the boy's power," and she says, "My power belongs to no boy." And I can hear Arwen just groaning all the way from Middle Earth.
I believe the line after that was, "I am all the Jedi."
Yeah. She pulls off her helmet and says, "I am no man. I am all the Jedi." And everyone goes, wait. We've plagiarized this. We can't do it. Make it something
by the
dumber.
way, happy May the 4th to both of you, by the way.
Don't care.
Traitor.
I can only betray that to which I have ever held allegiance.
Yeah, it's like he's never been a Star Wars fan. I don't know what we're doing here. Come on, we're so close.
So then the ship flies, and we get another terrible fight scene. And Peter shows up, and Tiger Lily shows up, and the cavalry arrives, but it's not too late this time because they're flying over. And Peter and Hook have another bit of heart-to-heart as they fight, and Peter apologizes for being a douchebag and tells Hook, "You've got fairy dust on you again. Just think happy thoughts." And Hook, deciding that he will be the emo of this story, goes, "I have no happy thoughts," and falls into the water. And the
Because
ship flies.
isn't that what we all wanted to see? Peter Pan crying over the supposed death of Captain Hook? Isn't that what was always missing from J.M. Barrie's story?
At this point, I think we're just lucky they didn't have Tiger Lily and Wendy make out.
That's what this was needed. That's what we needed, a lesbian wedding at the end of this.
Between teenagers.
Yes.
Between the underage, just because. That's common. Don't believe otherwise. Anyway, they fly back to England. The Lost Boys are dumped on this family, and I'm sure would then immediately be sent to the coal mines and the chimney sweeps because this is Victorian England and there are no child labor laws. So if you're going to be here, you're going to work. Peter reveals that this house used to be his house. And he ran away from home and he wound up in Neverland and he just kind of became him. And Wendy goes, "But don't you understand, Peter? You're missing so much and the world is missing so much by not having you in it." And he goes, "That's not true. You all know it." And I don't think I'm ready to grow up yet. So he flies back to the ship and he flies it back to Neverland. And Hook survived his fall, and as did most of the crew. And the alligator's not, and the crocodile's not a thing anymore. So he just smiles happily as he sees Pan return to Neverland because reasons.
All right,
and
Alexis.
Roll credits. I puke. The end.
Alexis, go ahead and do your craft review so we can get this over with.
Gladly, yeah. I think I said it when we reviewed Pinocchio. It's like, Disney, could you try? Just try. And frankly, this movie feels lazier than Pinocchio. I didn't think that was possible, but they did. This movie feels so thrown together. Now, I'm about to go on a small rant, and before I do, I need to give a little disclaimer about child acting. I normally don't like making fun of child actors because they're kids, And obviously they're still learning and they're still growing in their craft, and it's, you know, you don't, it's, I don't think it's always fair to mock child actors. Disclaimer over. I don't know what casting director thought the kid playing Peter Pan was a good fit, but they need to be flogged. That kid was horrible. He felt like he was reading all of his lines off of a damn cue card.
I mean, they wanted this take on Peter Pan was supposed to be like sullen and melancholy, which is what you want from, you know, your character that is supposed to exude like boyish wonder and excitement. And to the kid's credit, he got sullen and melancholy down pat. So I don't know how much of it is he's a bad performer,
No,
and how much of it is, how much of it. I'm not saying he's not. I'm saying I don't know where the line is between his poor performance and his poor characterization.
Peter Pan never looks like he's having fun. And the idea has always been Peter Pan is the boy who never grows up because he loves his adventures. He enjoys them. This is a boy who crows with excitement when he flies. The crow here does not sound like, I'm excited, I have so much energy I could crow. It sounds like hey, look, I learned how to make a weird noise.
It's like a dying goose, too. It's not a very accurate crow.
Okay, where else do we go with? The editing? We talked about this with Renfield. I think we found a worse editor. I can't believe that's actually possible, but I think we found them. The fight choreography in this movie is terrible. It jumps all over the place. We never get an actual good look. And part of me was sitting there wondering, it's like, okay, was this kid just such a horrible sword fighter that they had to jump around this much? Or what? You barely have time to focus on anything. None of the Lost Boys have any none of these characters really have any personality.
Nope.
You know, say what you want about the 1950s Peter Pan. It has its flaws, mostly from the time period, but I remember the Lost Boys. I remember those kids. I have no idea what was up with these kids. I don't even know which one was Toodles. How do you have a Peter Pan movie with the Lost Boys and not clearly identify who Toodles is? You should know this.
Oh, Toodles.
He's lost his marbles. And yeah, can we talk about how they made Neverland so boring? Okay, it kills me because there's one shot where you look up in the sky and you can see there's a circular rainbow in the sky, and you can see what looks like a Saturn planet with rings.
Yeah, there's a ringed planet somewhere out there. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's cool. Why don't you focus on that more often? Why is the big deal about Neverland just it's a green rock? I never get the sense of this is a magical world that is every child's dream. It's so boring. And yeah, as Robert mentioned, Jude Law deserves so much better. He's one of my favorite actors. And the idea of playing Captain Hook, one of the most iconic villains in fiction, this should be on most actors' bucket lists. You know, this should be a role that every actor wants to play at least once in their life. And he is given nothing to work with. Hook is supposed to be crazy over the top. And I'm not against them giving him and Peter a bit of a backstory. You want to do that, that's actually perfectly fine.
They gave him something to work with. It's just not interesting. What he's working with is that he's supposed to be like this thoughtful, reflective, melancholy, sullen, regretful, bitter Captain Hook, instead of the over-the-top, pan-obsessed, murderous pirate. Like, this is almost like they were like, let's use Peter Pan and Wendy as like a meditation on the nature of growing up and friendship, but let's take it from the standpoint of view of how it all's terrible. Growing up, becoming an adult is terrible. Like, who the fuck wrote this? Like, like a middle-aged angry woman. Like, fuck. Like, Mark, becoming an adult is terrible. Friendship is terrible. Nothing is good.
Mark, did you not see Wendy's future? Like I'm just taking the text of the story of the movie here. When Wendy gets her happy thought about everything she'll become when she grows up. She just kind of becomes a Victorian version of a screenwriter.
Yeah, I was
Like,
gonna
the
say
self-insert here, and then dies childless and alone. Like, the
Yeah, I
self-insert here
saw.
is very
Okay,
obvious.
it didn't look terrible, but I was like, okay, we're not. That's the kind of stuff you're supposed to look forward to when you grow up. And again, Mark, we were talking about this before the show started. Jude Law is not the only wasted actor here. Jim Gaffigan is also sadly wasted. Funny comedian. I enjoy his stand-up. And you have one scene of Hook and Smee together where they're going over the rules of being a pirate. It's like, rule number 1. So I was like, skip to number 37. It's like, that was a good scene. And those two actors had good chemistry. And then the director was like, okay, I don't want you two to have any more fun. So no more scenes together. And your wife said it best, Mark. Well, why the hell did they get Jim Gaffigan if they weren't going to let him be funny?
Right.
Why do you hire a prolific stand-up comedian for a role if you're not going to utilize their talent?
Yeah, they could have saved the money and just gotten anyone to do that. Like, there was nothing about Smee that was interesting aside from the fact that he mumbled most of his lines. All right. I don't have a whole lot to say about this that we haven't already snarkily said already. But I do want to talk about one of the things that was probably the most jarring, and it occurred right at the beginning of the movie, how washed out the color paletting is. Oof. This is not a pretty movie to look at. And that needs to be said because this is about a magical place where children go to escape adulthood. There should be, this is a place of magic and natives and adventure and pirates.
Look,
it should pop.
It should pop visually, and there should be whimsy attached to this, and there's none
right
here.
Right. No, it was like this is someone's editorial point of view about just life in general. It's all shitty. It's all drab. There's nothing to look forward to. And we're all just, we're all just sort of going through the motions towards death. Look, I'm not saying don't make that movie. It probably doesn't need to be Peter fucking Pan, though.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next big complaint about this movie, and it's a complaint about Disney right now. I'm all for deconstruction. I'm like Mr. Deconstruction.
No, sorta.
I love a good deconstruction. It takes talent. You can't just there's the Rian Johnson. What was it? Not undermining.
Okay, hang on. Let me try.
Just give me the phrase here, please.
Subversion first.
Thank you. That's what I was going to. There's the Rian Johnson like subverting expectations just to do it, but then there's like actual deconstruction because you're looking at something from a different point of view. You're examining something. You're saying, what else could this be? And I think the latter can be interesting. I'm all for a deconstruction of Peter Pan if you want to look at some of the issues Peter Pan raises. No one at Disney is bright enough to do it right, though.
No. Look, here's the problem with trying to deconstruct Peter Pan at this point. It's been done, and it's been done much better.
Thank you, Steven Spielberg. I'm sorry. There is no way you can talk about trying to deconstruct Peter Pan and not talk about Hook.
Right. I think Hook is a great example of a good Peter Pan deconstruction. What I'm getting at, though, is that Disney seems to be in this mode of trying to accomplish two things with their streaming movies. One, they want to give girls more heroic lead roles at the cost of everything else, and in usually a bait and switch way, where we're going to do this thing with a male lead character in the title, but we're not going to make it about that character. We're going to give everything to the side chick.
Well, not only that, but taking the legitimate female heroes and then removing effort. Like this, when we reviewed Mulan, we talked about this. Like, the animated movie tells a great story about Mulan having to work hard, and she becomes a very capable warrior, and she's intelligent, and there's a lot that's aspirational there, but there's a lot of work that gets put into it. Live action Mulan is, well, you were born with extra chi.
Yeah, she's a mutant.
Female characters in Disney live action remakes are always perfect. Hell, they did that with the live action Lion King. I don't know if you guys remembered this. In the animated Lion King, Nala was just as mischievous. When she was a cub, she was just as mischievous as Simba. She's like, ooh, elephant graveyard. Let's go have fun. Let's go break the rules. So then when she's older, it's like, oh, she's grown. She's matured. In the live action, Nala's going, Simba, we shouldn't be here. We should get out of here. It's like, yeah, the women in Disney live action remakes are flawless. They are not allowed to have story arcs.
Right. So, and it's not just Peter Pan and Wendy. This is just the latest example of the same thing over and over and over again. If you want to focus on, and to a degree, there Wendy is your like point of view character about the struggles of growing up. You know, look, I am surrounded by adults who don't want to grow up. They put off adulting. Adulting is hard.
You're talking about your job, right? You're talking about your job, right?
Right. There's an entire community.
Blink if you need help.
There's an entire community of people, and like the people in that community will fully admit to this. They're full of arrested development. These are people who apparently missed out on like their childhood. And I actually talked about this with Jesse when we talked about the rise of board game culture. There are, big segments of the adult community that, look at the things of their childhood that they missed out on and are trying to experience them as adults. You want to look at the Wendy character and examine that. I think there's room for it in this universe for that movie. I think there's room for it in an adaptation of Peter Pan. It would be nice if you had the talent to do it, though. This has got to be the... I look at the people who work on these Disney streaming movies, and they all come across to me like first-year college students who think they're smart and think they're worldly and have not seen shit or done shit and think their opinion matters.
Mark, you and I referenced something in the same vein when we were playing around with like casting the other day, and you threw up a bunch of younger actors, and I said for the role we were talking about, like somebody's got to have some grit here, right? Yeah, and I think we even brought it up, like, because you brought up, Dolph Lundgren in Rocky IV didn't, he didn't look, he looked like Superman, right?
Right.
But Dolph Lundgren had lived.
Yeah.
Like you can see it. It's in him. It's everywhere in him that life has happened to this guy. And I don't want to go too broadly. I'm going to speak broadly here, but I'm trying not to be like. We're now getting to a point, especially with acting, to say nothing of writing, which has always been a little bit this way, where everyone kind of coming up has come up in acting. And that's a real bad way to go about this.
They say like in the law community and some business communities, they don't want business majors, they don't want law majors, they want people from various walks of life because it helps to have perspective. The more people you have with different perspectives, the better ideas come out of that idea factory. And it's the same thing you're talking about with performance. When you have people who, it's a kind of a silly example, but look at like professional wrestling. When people come out of the world of professional wrestling into acting, they're bringing with them a perspective. They're bringing with them talents that their cohorts who have been just through acting don't have. If nothing else, to be able to do stuff physically that the average person can't. But there are other people who, you're talking about like Dolph Lundgren. Dolph Lundgren was like a chemist and whatnot. Like he had seen and done different things before he was an actor.
Yeah, he had like a very advanced chemical engineering degree. He'd been training. He had trained and competed in Kyokushin karate tournaments of full contact stuff for many years. So life had happened to this guy. It wasn't just okay. I went to primary school, did fine, got into my parents' alma mater, went into the liberal arts, used their connections to get into a creative thing, and now here I am.
Right.
Or, the government example of this being, of course, I graduated with degrees in like poli-sci or whatnot, did a postdoc, did my doctorate, did internships at a liberal think tank where I met a politician, so I get appointed to a government job until my guy gets voted out. Then I get hired by one of the companies for which I did favors as a member of some kind of regulatory body. And then I do that and collect a giant paycheck until such point as I can get back into government. You kind of bounce back and forth between those things. Like these professions have become ludicrously insular, and it's to their detriment.
So going back to, Peter Pan and Wendy, my biggest problem with this movie is that it thinks it's smarter than it really is. It thinks it's more insightful than it really is. And instead, it's just a sullen, melancholy bore. It's frustrating because, Chris Bailey in our most recent chat was like, at what point does Disney press the panic button? Like, they already have. Yeah, they pressed it a while ago. That was the whole announcement of we're doing Toy Story 500. We're doing Inside Out. We're doing this. We're doing that.
Their panic button came when they said, okay, so we're cutting like $5 billion out of our budget.
Yeah.
And more than half of that is content creation. So
right. But as I said, if you look at like Peter Pan and Wendy now, this is yet another in the long line of products that were poorly made at a time where this seemed to be the agenda, the agenda of, hey, at the cost of any male audience we could ever possibly have now or in the future, we're going to put the females first. But we think that just putting females first, the force is female, is enough. We don't actually have to write good characters or good stories. Just putting them up front, that should give us all the flowers. And unfortunately, I don't know how many more of these are left in the tank before an adult got a hold of these people. I'm like, enough already. We can't do this anymore.
For the record, this one technically started development. No, just development, mind you, in 2016.
Right.
Filming and whatnot began in 2020. Obviously, they got pushed back, but we're still 3 years on from when this thing shot and wrapped.
Which I got to look and see what the next couple of. I mean, I don't want to get off on a tangent here because we're going to spend enough time talking about it when we actually talk about the movie. But that Little Mermaid, I'm scared to death that based on this Canary in the Coal Mine, based on Pinocchio, Peter Pan and Wendy, I can't remember what the last in theater live action one was. Cruella. I'm deathly afraid of what the Little Mermaid's going to be, and not because
it's going to suck.
It's going to be so bad.
I am terrified of watching that, Mark. I was talking to my friend yesterday, and we were discussing the new pictures they released of Ariel's sisters and everything. I was just like, I don't want to have to review this.
Yeah, it's gonna, when I said this a little ways back, when you lose the public's trust, it's really hard to get it back because people like we're paying attention, so we'll know when there's a shift happening. But we're a decade out from any normal family member, with kids, being able to trust Disney. Look, take me out of this for
6 years minimum.
Take me out of this for a second because I'm embedded in the film criticism community, the we
do this.
Yeah, podcasting, whatever. So take me out of it. But my kids and my wife watched this with me on Monday night.
Did they walk out before they could leave?
Not a single person was awake by the time this movie was over. Only me, and only because I had to review it.
I was saying, what did your daughters think about Tiger Lily being girl boss and having absolutely no other character whatsoever?
I mean, like I said, she didn't stay through the whole movie.
She didn't remember it?
Yeah, so she was like, oh, that looks cool. And then she was like, oh, it's bedtime. Bye. My son was really funny. He was like, I don't understand the stupid thing with the shadow. Why are we wasting time with this? I'm like, I'm sure it was in the book somewhere.
It is.
But the point being, and then I'm gonna leave it alone because I don't have a whole lot else to say. It's drab to look at. It's poorly written. A lot of poor performance in this. I mean, the poor girl who plays Wendy, she's doing her level best, but she's not.
Okay. Also,
she's not given a lot to work with.
For the record, about people who kind of nepotism their way into acting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you in that. Look, Ever Anderson is not the worst thing about this movie.
No, I think she's trying. By the way, do you remember the Red Letter Media thing about the kid who plays young Scott Summers in the last couple of X-Men movies? And it's like he's got pronounced lips. He was like, the best thing about this guy's facial features are his lips because that's all you see because he's got the fucking mask on.
Ty Sheridan, right?
Yeah, your lips are gonna be famous. That's all I could think about with her. I looked at her and I was just like, ooh, someone saw your lips and were like, let's get this kid in pictures because you got nothing else going on.
Well, for the record, since I brought up nepotism in particular, she is the daughter of the married couple of Paul Anderson and Mila Jovovich.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Why should talent win the day?
Hollywood nepotism it's been an old tradition it was an old tradition when I was young. Like,
the one
I would say I agree with you guys that she's clearly trying, but the thing that struck me about her is I thought she's like she's 15. I did look it up. So she was probably 14 when she made this. She looks so much older.
Yeah.
Than that, and I don't know if that's her, or they did the makeup weird on her to make her look older or something, but I remember looking, it's like, sweetie, you're supposed to be acting like you're 13, 12 maybe. You look like you're at least 19.
Well, this is not her first film credit. She actually was the young version of Natasha Romanoff in Black Widow.
Ah, yes.
I have scrubbed the majority of that movie from my brain with good reason.
Last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll pitch it over to you, Robert. Yeah, I think taking Peter out of this and focusing on Wendy as much as they did, and then not really. Oh, okay. I remember what I was going to say now. The Tinkerbell thing. Like, I could live with the race swap Tinkerbell. I don't care about that. But they took everything that made Tinkerbell out of the movie.
Yeah.
So I actually thought the actress who played. Oh, for the record, okay, have either of you ever watched the Tinkerbell movies?
Okay, I finally fucking remember what it was I wanted to say about this. I watched them with my kid. And it's funny because I watched the Drinker's video on this, and he made a point of bringing this up. And it's really true. Like, this is, again, like, what's popular about Star Wars? Lightsabers. What's popular about Tinkerbell? Fairy dust. No, that's not what was fun about Tinkerbell. What was fun about Tinkerbell was that she had a fucking attitude.
Yeah.
Like, she was just like, I'm in love with Peter, and in comes this bitch, Wendy. I'm gonna throw her out the fucking window. How about that? Like, Tinkerbell's an asshole. She's great. And Tinkerbell had her own heroic moments in the Peter Pan cartoon. In here, it was just like, smile brightly for the camera and throw fairy dust because that's all anyone thinks that you are. And it's like, no, she had an actual character in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tinkerbell is kind of a sadist in the book. She has no qualms about killing anyone.
For the record, Barrie draws from actual fairies, like actual fairy stories for Tinkerbell. And if you're not familiar with how the Fae actually operate, it ain't pretty.
All right, Robert.
Tinkerbell was in that school of thought.
Go ahead and do your craft review so we can get on with this.
Yeah, this movie looks terrible. You mentioned it. I think this director's gift with his in terms of like what he likes to put on camera is taking something magical and putting it in the real world. This is kind of what he did with Pete's Dragon. It's definitely what he did with The Green Knight, which is, again, ostensibly true history, just with a fantastical twist. It doesn't work here because Neverland isn't supposed to be the real world. It's meant to be this. You almost need like a Tim Burton visual style to get Neverland across. And Lowery was the wrong guy for this, just straight from the beginning. Wrong guy. We brought up the action scenes a couple of times. There's nothing more painful than when you have to watch grown men slow down everything they do to accommodate child actors. Watching 8-year-old Leia outrun grown men, and when you can clearly see these guys stop running because, like, oh, I can catch this child. It's not actually that hard. Watching the sword fighting here was so bad. All the kids, every single one of them, just the most rote, mechanical, physical actions, and you're dealing with actors and stuntmen who kind of know what they're doing. So they're having to just dumb down everything to try and make this work, and the editing is trying to cover it. I have a little bit of... This movie also misses a pretty important point about the physical relationship between Pan and Hook. Peter Pan can't beat Hook in a straight fight. He's never been able to. Peter Pan wins because he cheats. And that's fine. Like, Hook doesn't play fair either. This is like mutual cheating going on. But that bit near the end of the story, the original
he outwits him. Then is the better way to say that. Peter Pan is able to depend on his wit and his dexterity. It's not just his wit; it's the fact that he flies. I said wit and dexterity. Dexterity is not flying. Oh my god!
No,
for the sake of this argument, as far as Disney goes, dexterity can be, or flight can be included in the dexterity group. Okay.
Thank you. Moving on.
But the point is, like, every time they fight, Pan has to work around the physical handicaps he's operating under, and Hook has to try and think his way around Pan's advantages, and it creates a fun dynamic.
Hey, I got to stop you there, because it reminds me of why the Star Wars movies are stupid. Everything after Return of the Jedi, and kind of Return of the Jedi too, but let's stick with the prequels. Robert, we could do, and we're not, but we could do an entire hour on why sword fighting is the way that it is, why certain swords are longer than others, what that means when you have a sword of a certain size, and what you're supposed to be doing with it, how it changes your movements, etc., etc. Why you don't give a midget frog a sword? Because Yoda is what I'm talking about here. You don't give fucking Yoda a man-sized sword and expect him to be able to participate in a normal sword fight. It doesn't go that way, and it looked way ridiculous in Attack of the Clones when they did it. But it was like this fundamental misunderstanding of what sword fighting is. When you look at Peter Pan, you'll notice Peter Pan is always going at Hook with a dagger. Like, the Hook, generally speaking, has like a normal-sized sword, right? Peter, because he's he's flying around. He's a smaller guy. He's flying around. He's more dependent on speed than anything else, and the ability to outthink and outwit Hook. He doesn't need a large weapon. They're not going at it with equal-sized swords, and I needed to point that out because it's yet one of those like finer points of making action movies and doing certain things with action movies that is a lost art. People making these movies don't understand the fight scenes they put in them. They think that they saw something once as a kid, they thought it looked cool, and now everything has to be that thing, which is why a midget frog has a fucking sword and hops around and flips everywhere.
Yeah, and again, like, but I'm willing to go a degree of this with Peter. Wendy being able to use wooden sword fighting with her brothers to fight off 3 grown men at a time. I'm sorry, like, we're not just a bridge too far here.
Right.
Like, we are way out there. So that it didn't work. I give Jude Law, and we all said, like, I give Jude Law a lot of credit. He is trying his utmost to sell this complicated relationship that Hook has with Pan in this version of the story.
You'd have been better started being like, I didn't want to be a child forever. You're wrong. And that's that. And I was perfectly willing to just let you be wrong, but then you cut my fucking hand off and fed it to a crocodile who won't leave me alone. So fuck you.
Again, if you want to actually do a backstory between Hook and Pan, go for it. I think a decently written one would add a lot to the story.
Like, that alone, what I just said would have been a compelling enough story. We didn't need more than that.
Not really. And it's especially jarring anytime Hook and Pan have to share the screen, because you've got Jude Law like acting, and then you've got Pan reading.
Yeah.
And it's real obvious.
And Jude Law regretting his life decisions.
Just a few of them.
And Jude Law saying, wow, all of a sudden my role in Captain Marvel's looking a lot better than this.
Why did I sign with this studio? Because I'm the CGI guy, so I have to bring this up again. The flying through London CGI is just bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just really bad. The crocodile is one of the worst things I've ever seen. Just terrible.
And it actually killed me that they did look so terrible, because the crocodile is a huge part of the story.
Yeah.
And I was genuinely hoping to see it a little bit more, because the crocodile chasing after Hook is one of the most iconic parts of the story. Not to mention, it's always a lot of fun, and I was looking forward to seeing Jude Law just, scream like a little girl and run off crying because of how terrified he is of that thing. And it only shows up once, and that's it. I don't think they even ever explain the whole ticking part of
Nope.
it.
They don't. So it's, it's kind of a mess. Look, I'm much like Mark. I don't mind deconstructions. They're useful and they can be interesting. But the problem with the Peter Pan story, believe it or not, is after it was deconstructed by Steven Spielberg, and bear in mind, Hook is an example of how a deconstruction doesn't have to be dark. Like there's this notion that your deconstruction must lean dark. It must be moody. Everything must be more violent. Everything, no, that's really not how you have to go about that. Sometimes it is, but not always. Hook deconstructs Pan in the best way. And it still maintains the sense of magic and whimsy and wonder. And for some reason, that 30-year-old movie does a better job realizing Neverland and everything related to it than this does.
Hey, since you brought up Hook, I have to now bring up Pan, but only because I listened to the critically acclaimed guys review this. And I'm starting to wonder, between critically acclaimed and Red Letter Media, if I should continue to listen to these people. Because we heaped praise on Evil Dead Rise and they didn't love it. And we're here tearing apart Peter Pan and Wendy. And my good friend, William Seibold was like, I didn't think Pan was that bad. And I remember our reaction to Pan being like, this is the worst thing we've ever seen.
You know what? Here's the only thing I'm going to say about that. I think Pan looks better in hindsight now that we've got 2 other of these movies that really suck.
Hey, at least, say what you will about Pan, at least they knew how to make Neverland stand out. You remember how Neverland looked in that movie.
No, the only thing I remember about that movie is the Gregarian monk chant of Hugh
Jackman singing Nirvana.
Yeah,
I'll
never forget that. What's the other one besides this one that you think is better than Pan, or not better than Pan? What else has come out between then and now? Because all I remember is Pan.
I can't remember exactly when it came out. It might have been more contemporary to Pan.
Mm-hmm.
But there was an attempt at another slightly darker take on it a few years ago. I forget the year, but it's not worth going into.
Was that the one that had Jeremy Irons as Hook?
It might have.
Yeah, that
it might have been that one.
More faithful to the original J.M. Barrie story. It was kind of dull, but I remember not hating it. It was visually very interesting, and Jeremy Irons as Hook, it's like that's a perfect casting choice.
Yeah, another kind of sad instance of very talented actors in roles that they should be very, very good at being let down by literally everything around them.
I'm looking at the years. I don't see anything between 2015 and now, but yeah.
Okay.
Go on.
Well, yeah, you and I, we kind of tore Pan apart because of its writing more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And that's the big letdown here, I think, as well. Just, it's badly written. There's no reason for half the characters to exist.
Yeah.
I wasn't kidding when I said Michael and John could have been left behind. They don't add anything. The Lost Boys could have been completely excised from this. They don't add anything.
That was the thing. And what I remember from the cartoon is part of the reason why Peter went to London was he recognized the need to have, he didn't want to take care of the Lost Boys. The Lost Boys were there to go on adventures with him, but there was this tacit recognition somewhere in the back of his mind that these kids need caring for, and I'm not the one to do it. I'm a fucking child. So he went to London to find a mom, And he was like, "You'll do, 12-year-old girl." And so Wendy's there to take care of the Lost Boys, and and so you spend time with Wendy and the Lost Boys, and there's a relationship that's building between them, much like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. None of that in this movie, as if they looked at that and like, none of that's important. It is the most frustrating thing.
It's the most important, believe it or not.
Well, it's the most frustrating thing that, like, in remaking these movies, they look at the old stuff and they're determining things aren't important, and they're taking what they think is important and they're focusing that. And like, one, you don't have enough movie when you do that. Like, when you're throwing out so much of this other stuff and saying it's not important, and you're only holding on to these little bits and going, this is it, this is our movie, you don't have enough movie.
Yeah, which is weird for this one in particular, because it's about 2 hours long.
Well, it's 2 hours of droning conversation.
Yeah,
I think we're in agreement here. Just do yourself a favor, go watch Hook.
Hook's really, yeah.
Anything else, Robert?
Yeah, that movie still really holds up.
I don't think I had anything else. Again, there's just this entire movie approaches this story from a fundamental misunderstanding of what it's supposed to do, what's supposed to make. Because, like, or maybe a better way to phrase this. The story of Peter Pan is a story about the necessity of growing up, the dangers of growing up poorly, and the dangers of not growing up. Is kind of what that story is supposed to convey to you.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody told that to the writer here, and they went, okay, we'll be as ham-fisted and as stupid about this as possible. So when I say it misunderstands what's going on, I don't mean that this is someone who read Peter Pan and went, oh, this is a story about the power of friendship. Like, no, you weren't that far off. But you really missed some important details, some important nuance as far as everything that played out here.
Well, as I said before, it comes across like the people making this film didn't want to grow up either, and are resentful of it. And Peter Pan is their way of conveying their dissatisfaction with having to have grown up and be adults and pay bills.
So
which I can't tell you how much that irks me and makes me hate this movie that much more.
This movie has the weirdest relationship with this stuff, because the original story has a very particular point of view. Growing up is good and necessary, is fraught with peril.
Yep.
But that's the way of life. And when you go against the natural order of things, when you try to become, this,
you make everyone around you miserable.
Yeah. And this movie decided that, well, we'll have Wendy not want to grow up, but then she's going to decide very quickly that Neverland sucks, which is not the point. The point isn't that Neverland sucks. The point is Neverland is kind of awesome, but you can't stay there forever because of the damage you do to yourself and everyone around you. And in trying to turn it into, no, this sucks, Pan sucks, everything sucks, isn't it great to just be an empowered woman who can, in Victorian England, go on to become a world-famous author? And then, because I became a screenwriter. And no, you are not getting this.
Yeah. All right. Back in the old-timey times, Robert hosted a podcast.
Yeah, for the record, we are not talking about the money. There is no money. This thing burned a pile of cash, and it kept someone warm.
We're doing an impromptu podcast. And I want to give a quick introduction.
All right. When your internet catches up. And we lost Mark. Figures.
I was worried for a second that was me. Again, for those who are wondering why every now and then it sounds like I'm jumping into a twister and being carried out to the land of Oz, I'm in a car right now. So I was honestly worried when you guys went quiet there. I'm like, and I hit the dead zone.
No, that was Mark's internet being a little bit wonky, so we will...
Hang on, do we have him back?
Hey, am I back? Can you actually hear me now?
You look like you're back.
Yeah, now we can.
Yay! Anyway, before my internet goes out again, back in the old-timey times, Robert ran a very successful and popular podcast that was adored by all the ladies called Everyone Loves a
None
Bad
of that
Guy.
is true.
Called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. It was wildly popular. It had 1 million downloads per episode.
None of that.
And it
None
ran
of
for like
that.
100 years. But then Robert, having
it ran
left
for a year and a half.
and so Robert retired at the top of his game, having conquered podcasts and all other audio mediums.
I really decided that Joe Rogan needed a break.
So, having said that, because of the aforementioned ridiculous conversation about Peter Pan being a child trafficker, and Robert walking in going, well, hang on, Peter Pan's also not the hero of his own story either, and me wanting to shove an ice pick through my head, I thought, let me give this time to Robert to do an impromptu, Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, Peter Pan. Take it away, Robert Winfree.
Dana White.
I'm sitting there going through, like, what shows did he do? So I can quick pull pictures for it. I'm like, oh, the Promoters one. I like that one. Dana White.
I mean, he's not my favorite person in the world, but God.
We did a whole show on evil promoters.
We did, but you went from Hannibal Lecter to Dana White to the Terminator. It's
I think he fits right in. All right, this is your show. I'm just giving you the time.
You foisted this on me against my will.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Okay, for the record, I feel bad making the argument I'm about to make because this movie already just so thoroughly stomped Peter Pan into the ground. It feels mean-spirited for me to come along and now go. So so for the record, I have a couple of these. I have a couple of these supportable via the text of the stories, but kind of deliberately twisted or slightly subversive takes on material that people know. Most famously, I have argued persuasively in the past that Romeo and Juliet is a comedy the whole way through. Because my brother chiming in that he agrees that Dana White is the biggest villain of all time, to which I say, you know nothing of Don King. But again, there's an argument, the general interpretation of Romeo and Juliet is that of a tragedy, that the first two acts are structured like every other Shakespearean comedy until there's a duel, because in duels in Shakespearean comedies, nothing happens. In Romeo and Juliet, somebody dies, and it triggers the wave of violence that ushers in the end of that story. My argument is that, no, every death is still funny. It's dark humor, and very much not not what you might expect, but it's still meant to be funny. And again, you can argue it. I don't mind arguing that point. And in fact, I think someone making a comedy of Romeo and Juliet that is still like Romeo and Juliet, not deliberately switching it to a rom-com, would work because it's just dark humor. I have one of these for Pan as well. And again, I have a few of them. My argument for Pan is more that he is not really a hero. He's more of a cautionary tale, believe it or not, even within the context of his own story. Because Pan doesn't change. In Peter Pan and Wendy, everyone's aware that they're actually damned. Everyone is aware that we're living in this terrible purgatory like hell where nothing changes. That's really not the case in the original story, but their awareness of it is not there, but it is their state. To be damned is simply to be unable to progress. Pan can't grow. He is the same. He exists, he does his stupid things, he is everything about being an adolescent boy, both good and bad. And he's simply a cautionary tale. The story of Peter Pan, in its original context, is about the characters that grow, about the characters that change. It's about the darling children, believe it or not, who see the necessity of growing up, who are touched by this magic, but then understand its limitations, understand the dangers associated with it. Instead of just being instead of Wendy kind of moping around going, but I thought being a child forever would be great. And why aren't your adventures all full of whimsy? And why am I being shot at? And Peter Pan going, because that's what adventures are. Like, they're not, what did you think they were? And she can't say, oh, I thought they'd be, you know, a Barbie doll because I can't be a woman. And Pan's actions are almost always driven from a place of not heroism. He has adventures because he likes them. He doesn't care that he puts other people in danger. Not really. Like, he'll fight to get people out of trouble as quickly as he'll put them in it in the first place.
All right. Can I jump in there? Peter Pan is an agent of chaos. I'm willing to buy. But Peter Pan is sort of saved in terms of being a hero by, he can be sort of shook from his chaoticness.
He can be shook from his he can be shook from his narcissism. Is really
fine. He can be shook from his narcissism to realize that his friends are in fact in danger, and he does in fact know right from wrong. In the most basic level possible. I don't want my friends are good. I like my friends. I don't want them to be hurt. These are all good things. We would agree. I may have put them in danger. Now I got to go get them out of danger because they cannot save themselves. And I struggle with your argument just by that alone, that he's not a hero, when the hero, I think we would all universally agree, the hero is the one that goes into the danger to rescue those that cannot rescue themselves. He does that. He does that repeatedly.
He does. I'm not. This might seem like a very semantic distinction I'm about to make, but give me a second here.
Between the two of us, the devil, you say.
It's not that he's incapable of heroic action.
Okay.
That doesn't make you a hero.
Okay.
Look, this is not just a narrative truth. This is a real world truth. There are people in the world capable of great heroic action who are terrible people.
Fine. And
part of the reason I bring that up is you have to be very careful if you try to lionize them. And
if you're adding to the definition of hero someone we should aspire to be,
yeah,
sure.
Because that's
no one should aspire to be Peter Pan. We got that.
Because that's an integral part of what it means to be a hero. It is an aspirational thing.
Okay. And when you add that caveat to it, sure. When you flatly say he's not a hero, it's like, no. He does heroic things. And yeah, to the definition of, is Peter Pan someone you should aspire to be, someone who puts his friends in dangers and then is happy to get them out of it? Well, no, obviously not. But I'm not entirely sure back in the 50s when they fucking made Peter Pan that anyone at Walt Disney was thinking about that. I think they were thinking, let's put the damsel in distress and let's send, the hero in with the dagger to go get her out of it. And that was as much thought as they put into that.
Well, I'm sure. And it's part of the reason that especially the animated version of Peter Pan is so grating.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is self-absorbed, he is selfish, he is utterly oblivious to his friends. He only cares about them to the extent that they directly and immediately impact him. And to the extent that Peter Pan in the original has any sort of an arc, it's realizing that, no, actually, I kind of do care about these people.
Right.
See, I think you can't really describe Peter Pan as a villain and what he is. If you're comparing it between this movie the animated movie, other incarnations, and the original book. In the original story arc, I always felt that Peter Pan was more the identity of child innocence. The concept of, you know what, children will grow up, but for now, let them hold on to their innocence, because when it's gone forever.
See, I would disagree with that. I think, this is Everybody Loves a Bad Guy after all. And I think there's an argument to be made that, an even strong argument, that he's not just not the hero, but I would argue that he's the bad guy in this sense only, not in the stupid, he's a child trafficker and a groomer stupid argument, because that's asinine. But in kind of the way, Pinocchio has to deal with moral choices and temptation, Peter Pan is temptation, the temptation of never growing up. The problem with Peter Pan, I think, in a modern context, is so many people, and at least American culture, I can't speak to Europe or the rest of the world, but definitely in American culture, we have turned this corner of looking at adulting as a bad thing. And many of us are like hanging on to youthful activities, where youthful ideas, identities, like nobody think about your dads, think about your grandparents. Again, I'm going to be 50, so we're talking about people that grew up in the fucking Depression and in the Cold War. Like, these were men that were trying to build things. They were motivated. They were trying to move forward. They weren't just running around in a figure eight motion. They were trying to get ahead. And I don't mean like in the, cut your neighbor off, get ahead business wise, make $1 million. But like they were earning a living to make a life for their family, to build forward, to get to a place where they could retire and enjoy life. They understood the responsibility of being an adult and the importance of it. They looked at like civic duty things like voting. And I know that, like, what? No, but it's true. Like the tapestry of American culture and social contracting was that adults did adult stuff for the betterment of the fucking culture. And I think now, and so like you look at a story like Peter Pan, and Peter Pan is this sort of moral tale about how that's scary for people. Like, oh Jesus, I have to eventually put away my toys and my childish things, and I have to get up every day and do a job and do a thing and take care of a family, and I have to sometimes sacrifice my own needs and wants for the betterment of those around me. That might suck for some people, and it might be scary, and that's what Peter Pan, I think, is supposed to be speaking to. But the moral of that story is that's the place that you go to as a mature, functioning person. And I think the problem why Peter Pan doesn't work now is that people look at that. So
many people took the wrong lesson from the story.
Yeah, like, but why can't I be a child forever?
You need to remember, there is an actual syndrome named after Peter Pan that diagnosed in the real world.
Right. So, when I look at, like, so when you say Peter Pan is not the hero, I'm willing to buy that argument if and only if we're talking about Peter Pan is a agent of temptation, leading you astray to a place of arrested development, which is bad for the culture.
Now, again, that, like, what is Pan in that story? He is something to be overcome by the characters we follow. Now, he's not trying to murder anybody. He's not Hook. Hook, what you get with Neverland, actually, when you kind of break this down, you get two very different dangers, but they are the two dangers inherent to maturation. You either don't, and you become Peter Pan, which is not a good thing, or you grow up bitter and manipulative and controlling and violent, and you become Hook, which is not a good thing. And too many people decided, I think too many people reading the story, seeing the story, and not really understanding the point, looked at that and went, well, isn't Pan better than Hook? And believe it or not, that's a narrower argument than you might think if you want to break down what's worse for people. But the point is, the ultimate point is, neither of them is correct. This is the fundamental clash, internal and inherent to everyone. Your inner child, your inner innocence, your inner screw everyone, do whatever I want, it's fun, and occasionally do the right thing, versus your inner desire to dominate, to control, to lash out, to punitively take action against all those who are enjoying their innocence. And these are the forces that, generally speaking, war within everyone, especially, not to overly gender this, but especially men. Like this is, Peter Pan is a very male tale, despite having essentially a female protagonist in Wendy. Wendy's the one who learns. Wendy's the one who goes on her heroic arc throughout the course of Peter Pan. The story is very much a cautionary tale for men about what happens if you give in to either extreme or either excess of what you could be. No, you don't want to be Hook. You don't want to be a tyrant. You don't want to be a slight, fleeting, selfish, unaware nothing of Peter Pan either. You really don't want to be that. And trying to find your way between those two perspectives is a difficult thing, but it's also a very necessary thing, because if not, again, you will wind up as one or the other, and neither's good. And that's my argument about why Peter Pan is not the hero of Peter Pan.
Okay. When you originally proposed the idea, I definitely had like one of those eye roll moments, because I was very much limiting I was very much limiting my definition of hero is does he save people or doesn't he? Superman saves people. It's what makes Superman a hero. But I think when you open it up to yes, but tell me about his personality, because you can absolutely do the right thing in the right moment and go right back to being terrible. If you run inside of a burning house to save an old lady and her cat, and then immediately go back to mugging people, you're still not a hero. You just did something heroic. And I get what you're saying. But to kind of round this back to what started all of this, when we get, and I, as silly as it was, I'm going to address it because this is the forum to address these things, and we have we have the time and the patience to do it, and so we have a little bit of time to spare on the show before we get into the Rotten Tomato stuff. But like Jason's idiot argument about he's grooming children, like no.
Well, let's hang on. In mild fairness to Jason, I'll be very mild in my fairness here. This was dovetailed off of a discussion about vampires.
Okay.
Because that whole conversation started with, hey, does the vampire born in 1916 dating the 17-year-old feel wrong to anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, there's a discussion there.
That's fair. But wait, he was born in 1916, sure, but he was turned when he was 17. So is he actually 17, or how does this actually work? Related to anyone he dates now who is
related to Twilight.
Yeah, because dude,
but what Jason was implying was
because
that
there's nothing more. I mean this. Like you got to be careful how you do it. But there's nothing more amusing if you have this sense of humor than pointing out the innumerable flaws in what is basically porn for women in stuff like Twilight and 50 Shades.
Yeah, and they're very tolerant of having them, having the stuff they like poke fun at. Anyway, listen.
That's why it's fun. That's why it's fun to do, because the overreaction is hilarious.
Child trafficking are words that mean something. You are kidnapping and taking children for the purposes of exploitation, abuse, etc. Okay.
Look, hang on. To play devil's advocate for just one more second. Didn't we just say that in the original story, Pan's here because the Lost Boys need a mother?
I mean, she went willingly. She wasn't kidnapping. He wasn't.
Come into the van, take the candy.
Hang on. She wasn't sold into motherhood. She, you take away her agency when you say stuff like that. I know you're trying to be funny.
I'm a little facetious.
Yeah, I get that you're trying to be funny, which is great. You're adorable because you're Robert Winfree and you're normally a robot. But when you're like, tee-hee, it's adorable. But the fact of the matter is, Wendy is a character struggling with being at this point of having to make a leap and grow up, and she's trying to put it off. And here comes Pan going, come with me to a place of mermaids and magic and you won't have to. And she's like, fun. And along the way, like, how do you feel about kids? Like, what?
Well,
And she gets there, and that's the other thing is like, she's not she's not get there thrown in chains and told, read him a fucking story, bitch. She gets there and she's like, oh, look, small children running around in bear cub pelts. Like,
you all desperately do need a mother.
Yeah.
And then she rises to the occasion, and it's kind of what helps her realize that, this isn't growing up is not the worst thing in the world.
Right. And that is the point of that, which when you say it's child trafficking, you are wildly mischaracterizing everything happening in that scenario. And it's to the point that it's insulting. The other thing that he says, like Peter Pan's a groomer. What is groomer implying? Okay, no, but he said it, so I want to.
No, like he said it, and I'm going to say it's unbearably stupid because Peter Pan has not actually gone through puberty. He does not understand physical intimacy on that level.
Well, that's the thing. Like grooming means something. Words mean things, and when you throw them out there, even if you're just being a troll, even if you're just being facetious, like think about what you're saying. So when you're grooming somebody,
grooming is insisting that your scantily clad drag show be performed for 8-year-olds.
Not getting into a debate with you about drag for children. Not here.
No, look, drag. I have no problem with drag when it's all between adults. Like, fine, knock yourselves out. Genuinely don't care. There's no reason for that to be around children. And look, to anyone out there going, hang on.
That is an opinion.
To anyone out there going, so shouldn't that? So what? Wouldn't you say the same about Hooters or something similar? Yes, I would.
Okay, and that is why I'm not arguing with you. You're entitled to your opinion about where this stuff is good and where it's bad. I don't want to get into it. The point is, when you talk about grooming, you're saying you are willfully playing on a child's psychology so that they are going to trust you enough that their guard is down and you can molest them. That's what that is. At no point does Peter Pan bring children to Neverland for sexual abuse. Come on, what are we talking about here? Again, you can kind of say the thing about like, well, he was purposely looking for a kid to like mother them, but it was literally like, I need some broad to look after these fucking filthy children because I don't want to.
I need someone to do women. I need a woman to do women's
That's a far cry from fucking child trafficking. Like I love Jason to death, and he's been a part of some wildly popular shows on this network. But I had to address those things because I'm sure other people have thought them too. Jason's funny. Jason's insightful. He's also not alone in some of the dumbest things he's ever said. I'm sure somebody out there also said them too. And I was taking this opportunity on Everyone Loves a Bad Guy to address them.
This is Damn You Hollywood. You just decided to resurrect this with a weird theme song.
I couldn't use Voltaire. I tried. And we would have been demonetized.
You probably would have been dinged, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like being dinged for this, at least not for that. Alexis, should we mercifully move this segment on?
I'm stuck in my car driving until we actually end this, and I personally would like to wrap things up soon so I can pull over and get some fucking lunch.
You could have just said yes, Melissa. All right, let's move on to...
You don't want to know how often that can come back at you that same way, Mark.
What? I'm concise.
Yeah, sure.
All right, the critical review.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Well, yet another example.
Yet another instance of the critics being so wildly out of touch with everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some of that's neckbeard backlash, but a lot of that
look, man,
the average person going, I don't want to watch this with my children. This is not a fun time, and this is not a fun movie night at the house.
Here's the thing. So for the record, for those of you listening via audio, our official critic score with 115 reviews is 65%, technically fresh. The audience score is 15. Now, here's my thing about this. Even if you take away the handful of idiots who are like, you race swap Tinkerbell, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Like, if you take away those handful of idiots and Look, if you want to argue that Pan should have looked like here's the only credence I'm going to give to this. Tinkerbell, I don't care about. Not one iota. Right? Not one. Magical Fairy, be whatever you want. Don't care.
Sure.
If you're going to set a movie in a specific location in a specific time period, like Victorian London, you're somewhat beholden to that for how things look. So having Pan look like an Indian, Indian, not Native American Indian,
Mm-hmm.
and half your Lost Boys, again, be like all wondrous shades of the rainbow, you've done a wild disservice to the story. If you, especially when, and this is what kills me about this just a little bit, nothing says you couldn't set Pan in 2020, right?
Yeah.
If you want a story that quote unquote reflects the world we live in today.
Well, it's so funny because like in some cases they're like married to conventions, and other ones, and other ones are just like, oh, we can't do it that way. Like we gotta, like, why are you picking and choosing what you're married to?
Again, this actually goes back to what I thought was interesting about Hook. There was an idea that all of the Lost Boys were actually taken from different time periods. The idea that time kind of doesn't work the same way in Neverland as it does in the real world. If you look at the way a lot of the Lost Boys are dressed, you can see that they're designed to look like they were taken from different eras of history. Hell, Rufio was clearly taken from the 80s, no question there. So, again, you could set this in another time period and have, anachronisms amongst the Lost Boys, but you need to pay more attention to that and make it more noticeable, I think was the term I'm going to go with. I'm not against the Lost Boys being different races, boys and girls.
I think it was that way in Hook too. I don't think they were all like white, blonde Caucasian children. They were all over the place.
They weren't. They were a bunch of. They were all different ethnicities in Hook, but you need to make it more obvious where they came from. You cannot have a bunch of black kids with Victorian English accents.
My kids pointed this out, and I think my wife then was like, "Oh my God, you're right. I think one of the Lost Boys in this iteration has Down syndrome."
He looks like it.
He does. I checked IMDb. He does.
And that is absolutely an inclusion studio note.
Hey, tokenism.
Yeah, I'm
not against it. I'm not against it, but it did feel very much like, let's just have him here because then we can have a kid.
No, but that's the thing. You're saying you're not against it. You're saying you're not against it, but you are. You're with me. Everything should be in service of the narrative or the aesthetic. When it's not, and it's just there, just so we can say, "Oh, look, aren't we inclusive?" Then it's wrong. Then you should be
again. It's
that's what I was saying. I was saying I'm not against it if it made sense to the story and it worked toward the narrative. I'm basically saying someone said we should do this. It's like, okay, give me a reason. That's what
does the Down syndrome kid do anything? This is because that he has Down syndrome. It causes a problem and the kids get caught. What is he there, or is he just there to check a box? If he's there to check a box, no, take him out. Why are you putting him there?
Exactly.
All right. Moving this on.
But Mark, you'll run afoul of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office.
So you can suck my dick. All right.
At what point do we get a Lost Boy who's flying in a wheelchair?
I hope. So I know anytime we bring up wrestling, your eyes glaze over and you have like a PTSD flashback to a previous relationship, Alexis. But if you could just go with this for a moment, because Jim Cornette's reaction to it was so funny to me. So AEW looks at, is a company that's looking at the WWE, and it's kind of the punk rock movement to WWE's hair metal era. They're like, everything you're doing is bad.
You're reaching there, but I get where you're coming from.
Everything you're doing is bad. We're gonna do the opposite of what you're doing because we want to make wrestling fun for people, but also inclusive, and we want to be the good guys. We want to be the white hat wrestling organization. They had a guy in a battle royal wrestle with no legs. He had no legs. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? No legs in a wrestling show. And it's like, and I remember Jim Cornette going,
hang on. And it happened exactly once.
Well, yeah, they couldn't get away with it a second time. But, I remember Jim Cornette going like, this is supposed to resemble a functioning athletic competition. And I'm not saying there isn't room for this in like, the Special Olympics and stuff like that, where you have people competing in sports with no limbs and whatnot, but they're competing against each other. This motherfucker with no legs was in there with big two-legged wrestlers. Come on, like you're
he's in there with Kenny Omega and
there comes a point where you're stretching credulity to where this is no longer believable and it takes you out of the story. That's a problem in any fiction, whether it's wrestling or traditional.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. All right, so here is the critical consensus written by ChatGPT on Rotten Tomatoes.
Not wrong.
Peter Pan and Wendy's obligatory fidelity to the animated classic keeps it from achieving Neverland Nirvana, but David Lowery's pensive direction gives this rendition some magic of its own.
This has no magic. Absolutely none.
And the audience says, fuck your mother. No, the audience says, slower and a lot less visually appealing than Disney's animated version, Peter Pan and Wendy lacks the magic of the classic source material. Yeah, no shit.
That's not just the 50s movie. Like, that's everything about it. I am more than happy to throw the general populace under the bus when they're wrong, and they're wrong on Rotten Tomatoes frequently. They're right on here.
Jennifer Green of Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media.
So there's an oxymoron if I've ever heard one.
Common sense is just rank stupidity.
The Disney brand will bring broad audiences to Peter Pan and Wendy.
Nope. Wrong.
But they might be surprised by the broody aesthetic and contemplative messages of Lowery's adaptation, not to mention its alternate ending. Let me address that really quick. There's an Instagram account that I follow that tracks the amount of views per streaming show or movie.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if, like, at boardrooms when they're having meetings about this stuff, if anyone is looking at, okay, but did people like it or hate it, or is it kind of a Netflix thing of, yes, but how many watched it?
I imagine more the latter.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if this got like the most watched movie of the weekend on streaming, this is then a hit for Disney, and it is just going to drag out.
Hang on. That's not as true as you might think.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just need this to be a decent hit opening weekend in terms of time spent.
Mm-hmm.
They need audience retention. Like, this is the problem The Mandalorian ran into with season 3.
Right. This is the large drop off. So I get what you're saying about, like, if people aren't coming back to this, if it's not getting rewatches, if people aren't watching it past the opening weekend, they may have to reconsider that.
Well, the other.
But I'm thinking of like Red Notice, which was like the most watched movie on streaming in the history of the medium.
Well, the other thing you have to watch out for when it comes to this is click-through rate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many people started and stopped.
Yeah.
Like, how many people watched the whole thing. Because that's another important caveat to take into consideration here. Yeah, Red Notice had a good opening weekend for Netflix, and then it fell off a cliff.
All right. Sarah Knight Adamson, Sarah's Backstage Pass. Arrgh. Peter Pan and Wendy is the perfect title, as Wendy shares the spotlight with Peter and at times outshines him due to her broad screen time and her determined performance.
Shares the spotlight, nothing. She's got the spotlight. Like I said, this movie has actually made Peter Pan a side character in his own story.
You turned your theoretically heroic, occasionally character into a whiny emo who gets slapped around and is just the poor guy reading the teleprompter behind the director's head. Like, no, you are just giving this thing a positive review because you think you like the messaging that all women are perfect.
And seriously, how pathetic was it that Peter Pan in the end said, "Oh, I left because my mother scolded me, so then I took off." I'm not saying that this character could have been redeemed, but wouldn't it have been more impactful if he'd said, like, his parents were abusive or something, or he was
It's Victorian England. Hey, it's Victorian England. He could escape from a workhouse.
Yeah, but give us a real reason that this kid ran away and found Neverland. There's a million reasons, and they are all believable. Just saying, I got scolded and I didn't like it. It's like, you're a whiny little bitch. Congratulations.
We already knew. Oh, you found our friend.
I did. Kevin Carr, a fat guy at the movies.
How long has it been, Mark, since we had to Look, we haven't shoved him in a locker in a while, actually.
No, but I did just spit on the floor and at his name.
I appreciate it.
Kevin Carr, fat guy at the movies. Still packed with wonder of the original, but it struggles against the modern necessities of an update of the story.
Shut up, Kevin.
There is no, again, like we complained about this. Let me reiterate. There's no magic and wonder to this movie. None. It's
And
drab.
if there is, the director decided not to focus on it.
It might be out of focus in the background somewhere.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay. Here's our Get 'em Winfree moment of the evening.
Boy. I'm trying so hard not to insult people when I do these.
Charlotte O'Sullivan of the London Evening Standard, top critic. Smarter and way more magical than Spielberg's Hook.
Oh, screw you, lady!
P.J. Hogan's Peter Pan or Joe Wright's Pan. This version, when it gets off the ground, soars. What did you spend the money on from that check you cashed, you asshole?
Yeah, that I hope the check cleared.
I'm just going to say this. You want to compare this to the 50s Peter Pan and the problems that have come from our culture advancing. I can't stop that. But if you're going to stand there and say this was better than Hook, no. No. You are an idiot.
Okay, allow me to present the fundamental difference. If you need to know the difference in the magic that takes place in Hook between this, I present to you two scenes. Feel free to watch them side by side. Wendy looking through a hollowed out tree branch, trying to use it as a telescope, and struggling with the magic of Neverland, and not working because it's a tree branch. And then small child off to the side goes, "You're looking at it the wrong way," so she turns it, and then it works.
And let me guess, compare that to the "you're using your imagination" dinner scene.
Yes, compare that to the world's greatest food fight. There is no comparison between Wendy having 3 seconds of struggling with the magic of Neverland and someone in the background going, "She's too grown up for magic," to Robin freaking Williams yelling at children for a while that you're children, and then wanting to eat, but there being no visible food because it's magic. It's child magic. You have to believe it. And he doesn't start, and the magic happens when he starts believing. And the look on his face when that happens versus what happens here with Wendy, there is no comparison. You have utterly failed in understanding any of this.
All right,
I never understood that telescope scene anyway. It's like she's looking at it raw, and then she just kind of turns it. It's like, I never caught the idea of, oh, she's learning to believe. It looked more like, oh, you left the lens cap on.
Right,
yeah,
let's
really
move on to the
stupid.
next one. Resident internet tart of Super Mario Brothers review fame, Grace Randolph of Beyond the Trailer. The first half of the movie is horrible, but the second half, don't you understand, is so fascinating it's worth your time. Lowery offers an incredibly sophisticated take on Peter Pan when he's interested. This is a story about Wendy and Captain Hook with Peter largely left out. Thanks, Grace.
How is that interesting? Moreover, Wendy and Captain Hook share one scene together.
Wait, I gotta read this one.
I get the feeling this person would think it was more interesting if we watched Captain Hook doing his taxes.
All right, real quick. Starting in January, movies that we liked this year. Hang on. Movies that we liked this year, Robert.
We have this idiot going. Yeah, there it is.
Hang on.
I see.
We liked Plane. We thought Plane was good.
Plane was fine.
We liked.
We like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we thought Dungeons and Dragons was good. I'm kind of going in order here.
That's fine.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. We liked.
We didn't hate Scream. I might have had my issue.
Yeah, we liked Cocaine Bear. Scream was fine. Creed was fine. Shut up. John Wick, one of the best movies of the year so far.
John Wick was awesome.
And then
we liked
Mario Brothers, one of the best movies of the year so far. Renfield, I liked Renfield. I haven't heard you guys' review on it yet, but I enjoyed Renfield.
We said it was okay. We said it could have done there could have been a little bit better editing, but for the most part, I think we said no one walked out of that saying we didn't like it.
Yeah. Evil Dead Rise, one of the better movies of the year so far. And then yesterday we talked about Big George Foreman. You
Fine.
know, we had some criticisms, but overall we thought it was a good, well-made movie.
The issues with George Foreman, for those of you who may not have heard our review of that one, it's more that we knew that movie and that story could have been better than it was, and that was kind of what.
Right. So here's Charles Kaplinski clearly doing drugs from Real Talk with Chuck and Pam. Peter Pan and Wendy is one of the year's best films.
Liar.
I imagine this idiot has seen exactly one movie this year, and it was Peter Pan and Wendy.
David Lowery's Peter Pan and Wendy provides a more adult, melancholy take on J.M. Barrie's seminal tale.
Peter Pan should not be subtle and melancholy. Why is that so hard to understand?
Because people hate being an adult and paying bills and being responsible. That's why.
Moreover, if you want to make a melancholy take on Peter Pan, I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying everything has to switch. This movie didn't switch everything, and you need an actor who can sell that. And again, I'm not going to jump on the kid too much because he's a kid, but if you asked way too much of that child actor to do this version of Pan.
Catherine Gonzalez from Awards Watch. Ugh. The updates to the cast and story are very much welcome without feeling forced or overbearing.
Bull.
She says about the Down syndrome fucking lost boy.
Bull. Okay, guys, you see that? You see that? You see what's going on over there? That's virtue signaling.
We'll do one more.
Not a phrase I like to use all that often, but it's absolutely appropriate there.
Let's see. Let's find a friend or a wife. One of the two.
Yeah, I can't say it. I was gonna say it, but I'm not gonna say it.
Pete Hammond of Deadline Hollywood Daily. Kids will eat it all up. Nope, they went to bed.
Like that, objectively false.
As they've been doing well for over a century, and Lowery's not necessarily necessary retelling does nothing to harm the impact of a story that itself is forever young. It
kind of does. Like Peter Pan is a story that's been bombarded over the last 10 years with terrible adaptations.
Robbie Collin typically hates everything of the Daily Telegraph UK top critic. But he liked this one. It's all done crisply and simply enough for an 8-year-old to easily follow along with the film's train of thought.
And yet, Mark, how did your 8-year-old do with this?
Went to bed to turn any adult on the sofa beside them to a sniffling heap. Nope, my wife went to bed and I was on my phone.
Wait. Scroll up. A little more. Richard Roper. How have you fallen, man?
Of the Chicago Sun-Times top critic, one of the most visually stunning trips to Neverland ever recorded. I have a good television.
I know. What are these people smoking?
Let's see. Anybody else good?
I have to agree with Roger Moore, and I don't like it.
All right. Last one here, and then we'll call it a night. Noah Gittell of Washington City Paper. Filled with childlike wonder? No.
Nope.
David Lowery's Neverland is a magical place? Nope. That's sometimes a bit too fixated on its infamous villain.
He's the only good actor and the only character that's actually written. No.
All right.
What is with these people?
All right. So tomorrow, speaking of these people, the Movies That Don't Suck guys will have an interview with the people behind Lace from Panic Fest. This is Everyone Loves a Bad Guy Saturdays. It's back and better than ever. Robert wraps up his row of comic book villain podcast by looking at the villains of independent comics. On Saturday, I'm back from the Jonas Exodus in the year of our Lord 2014, and we are reviewing Goat Whore, Restricting Rage of the Merciless. We got a re-airing of a
would have fit right in with Peter Pan and Wendy. Just a Goat Whore song.
We have DC.
You know what? Hang on. Sorry. Last craft thing, because I forgot it until just now.
Yes.
I actually like the sea shanties that are sung by Hook's crew. Whoever put those together actually did a pretty good job.
All right. I know Alexis has to do we might be losing Alexis momentarily, so I want to get her in to do her plugs. So let me just wrap up real quick. We've got the DC Meets Hanna-Barbera Volume 3. Never got a page on our website. It'll have a page on Monday. And then in the evening, a special Monday edition, because I am doing trivia the next night on Tuesday, so we're going to do it on Monday instead. Unless one of my friends needs me to help throw her housemate out of her house, I will be there to review Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I saw last night with my kids as part of a marathon of Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
So I have to ask.
Yes, sir.
Did you cry?
A lot. But not just during Volume 3. I cried a lot in the other two too.
Well, look, James Gunn makes emotionally affecting movies when he wants to.
Look, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is not perfect. It's the best Marvel. I agree with the sentiment that it's the best Marvel movie since No Way Home, but that's a low bar to clear.
It's an exceptionally low bar.
Yeah,
I didn't even like No Way Home that much.
So that being said, I do have some issues with it. We'll talk about it on Monday, provided I don't get asked to go do something else. We'll be there with David Wright and Alexis Hejna. The movies that don't suck guys will be back. They'll be talking about That's Our Time from Panic Fest. And then on Thursday, they'll be reviewing Ghosted and Evil Dead Rise. In the evening time, seeing as this is May the 4th month, Star Wars month and all, we're going to be looking at Galactic Empire on the Metal Hammer of Doom jukebox. And we're going to talk Star Wars, because why the hell not? All right, go ahead, Alexis. Show us where you pissed from.
All right. Yes, Honeysuckle Rose Creations, where fashion meets fandom at the intersection of geek and chic. And guess what? The reason that I'm coming to you guys from inside a car is because I'm on my way to Indianapolis for the Indiana Comic-Con. You know, speaking of people who don't want to grow up, I'm going to be working that event.
Hey, I insulted your entire clientele. You're welcome.
Yeah, I know you did. I just never got a chance to jump in and defend them.
There was no way you were going to. I was
There's-
very
Yeah,
much
I know
stuck on
there
that
wasn't.
opinion.
There's
All right,
a world.
so
There's
yes,
a world of
we're-
difference between putting off truly childish things and being able to look back fondly on.
Hang
them.
on, let me quick say something. So, like, you raised your children. You are a functioning adult. You pay your bills. You do your job. You're motivated to move ahead in your job, but you also like to take time out for video games and board games and dating and whatever else,
That's
and
cool.
whatever tickles your fancy. I generally don't have a problem with those people. Now that I've gotten myself out of hot water with one person in particular, it's the people that put all of those things above everything else to the exclusion of all else, and it harms everyone around them. When every life decision you have made is so bad that it puts you in a position where you are highly dependent on people around you because you cannot make a functional adult decision, that's a fucking problem I have. That's
Look, I
not
don't
the
think
same
I've
as
had.
what we're saying.
I don't think I've had any customers who decided they wanted to buy my wire wrap dice necklaces or Scrabble tile pins instead of buying dinner. Okay.
Okay, well, if you find them that do, you tell them Mark says I got a problem with that.
Duly noted. All right. So yes, Indiana Comic-Con. Looking forward to it. Gonna have fun. Gonna sell a lot of stuff. Hopefully. After this, we got NakaCon in Overland Park, Kansas, at the end of the month. And we also got some good news announcing for the first time we are going to be doing consignment work and selling out of Goblin God Games in Omaha, Nebraska. This is our first shop that we're going to be selling at out there. I am so thrilled about this deal with them. We're going to be dropping stuff off there at the shop in a couple of days. Looking forward to it. As always, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and under duress Twitter. That is Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic.
Thank you, Alexis. Have a safe journey. Robert Winfree, show us where you pissed from.
You really need to update that.
I will not.
No, you really need to.
Speaking of people hanging on to adolescent things.
Yeah, just a bit.
No, I've been. No.
Aren't you supposed to be the adult in the little relationship you have? Oh, I saw your soul die. Oh, I
have my moments.
I hit something I didn't mean to hit there.
I have my moments. All right, come on. Plugs. I want to be done at the 2-hour mark.
Well.
Okay, bye.
All right. You can find me covering mixed martial arts and professional wrestling over at 411mania.com. At the moment, it's just WWE SmackDown on Fridays, as AEW seems to be discontinuing their YouTube shows. Not just Elevation, but Dark seems to be going away as well. So they're restructuring over there, and fair play to them. We'll see what comes of it. And I cover, again, mixed martial arts action. UFC 288 is this Saturday, if you're interested in combat sports.
How is that going to do against the Canelo fight, you think?
Who's Canelo fighting?
John Ryder.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then.
It'll do fine. It's not going to do great, but the UFC doesn't care about pay-per-view numbers anymore.
Fair enough.
They have guaranteed mandatory minimums from ESPN that cover all their operating costs. They don't. It's gonna do fine. It's a decent enough main event. Do they care if Canelo sells more pay-per-views fighting some bum on Cinco de Mayo? Not really.
Okay, moving
They're
on.
doing just fine. So if you want my full preview of that particular event, you can listen to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. Wherever you're listening to podcasts, you can find me there. This weekend, it's a review of the event last week, which was an event that happened, and a preview of UFC 288. So tune in for my thoughts over there if you're so interested. I don't know if I should thank Mark for this particular episode of Damn You Hollywood. I don't think anyone's grateful for this, but we had a good time talking, so we'll take that.
I want to say, it's like, wow, he really came down on his friend Jason. No, I love Jason. Jason's an integral part of this operation and has been a part of the more popular shows, sometimes to Robert Winfree's chagrin. But when you say
I do not care about Jason's popularity. I do not begrudge him any of it.
However, when Jason says dumb, Mark will say dumb, and we will deal with the dumb.
So, anyway, here we are. Next week, as Mark mentioned, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, all the tiers, just all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you embarrass your children with all your crying, Mark?
No,
were they crying alongside you? Were you all just in a big group huddle?
I don't remember. I mean, I know, like, we talked about it after. By the way, it was like 2:30 in the morning when this was all done on a school night.
That just makes it worse.
But what's hilarious is the amount of people, like, so I'm like texting friends, I do my social media with them. You know, like I took pictures of them at the theater, like I always do, and I'm sending it to various people. And a handful of like my girlfriend, this other girl I'm talking to, they're like, on a school night? Come on, man. Like, you know, like how often do I get to do like the movie marathon with my kids? Like, I can't help it that it's on a school night. It's also a school night in May. School's almost over. They're fine.
Very close.
And my son just did high stakes testing and got like a perfect score. He's a genius. Now my daughter is going to have to go into entertainment or something. But
your daughter has to become a screenwriter, Mark.
Yeah, that's kind of where she's going. You know, just quickly.
You know what? No.
It's on a school night. Yes, my son's so smart it won't impact him. My daughter has done so poorly it won't impact her either. So you know we're fine here.
Look, your son's gonna change the world, and your daughter's gonna marry up. That's what we're hoping for here.
All right, stop making fun of my kids, you childless bastard. Finish your plugs.
I'm not making fun of your kids. Look, we all hope to marry up.
Okay.
The fact that you didn't.
Technically, I did.
It kind of comes out on the wash.
Anything else you're doing, Robert, before we go?
No, I think I'm back here next week for Guardians 3 and all the other great stuff going forward. We should be back at our normal time next week, so Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all very much.
Monday, the week after.
Oh, Monday.
Yeah, we're doing Monday at 9 o'clock, and then we're back. And then no Damn You Hollywood, but Robert and I will be doing a triple feature of Tetris, Boston Strangler, and Bruiser.
Oh, I gotta watch Bruiser. The other two I was not terribly impressed with.
And then we're back in our usual time in 3 weeks from 2.5 weeks from now for Fast X at our usual Tuesday time.
Oh,
that's gonna be fun. All right,
Mark, look me in the eye and say that.
For Robert Winfree,
you can't do it.
For Alexis Hejna, I'm
for Jason Teasley for inspiring this.
for Jason Teasley, who's gone back to his home planet, wherever he is. This has been Damn You Hollywood. Be well, be safe, and behave.